Good morning, everybody. I am Daniel P. Riley, Whimsyland Literary Coaching and Services, and this is Coffee and Christ on a Sunday morning, joined by Jonathan the Wellness Dad and Michael from Life Talks, as usual, to get into some interesting conversations this morning from a search for God. Because I think even though every single one of us has accepted God, we still seek him every day. And that's part of what we want to talk about today. The stream is called Comparison is the Thief of Joy. It's one of my favorite quotes. And we were getting into it a little bit yesterday during our group call on Saturday mornings about comparison and what it does to each of us, to anyone, and how the enemy can use it against us. So I know Michael, the Lord of Paradoxes, has a few that he can point out to us at some point here, but to start with, just from my personal perspective, it took me a long time to stop comparing myself to the rest of the world. But once I did, my eyes were opened to a whole new way of thinking. Part of that came from starting my own business, came from actually doing the thing that I always felt like God wanted me to do, which was write stories and share them with the world. That was the first real goal I ever had in life. And when I finally started doing it, the first thing I did was try to compare my stories to everyone else's. And that just spun me out. But as soon as I stopped thinking of my story in comparison to someone else's story, we'll say, since he says boo the enemy, Brian McCoppin's story, or Brian Niemeyer's story, or I'll keep going with Brian Asher's story. As soon as I stopped comparing what I was doing to other people, I was able to see my story more clearly. And I had more. And instead of going like, yeah, you're going to do the search a little bit to do your target audience stuff and whatnot, but instead of looking at the prolific bestsellers out there that do the genre that I was thinking about doing, I was just looking at who liked that sort of thing. Stopped caring about who had already been successful at writing the thing that I wanted to write in my own unique way. But it's hard. I mean, you go through it in basic function of life, especially on social media. And all of what Instagram culture is designed around comparison. Look how cool my life is compared to yours. That makes me better than you. No, it doesn't. But it's a really hard thing for any of us to look past. So I'm going to turn it over to the boys then. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times what we're seeing on social media is just a blip of time, right? And that's one reason why I really, really appreciate the accounts that say, all right, because we homeschool our boys. So of course, naturally the algorithm pops up a lot of homeschooling stuff. And there's this mom that says what most people show with homeschooling. And it's like this soft little song to like these two little kids at a table doing their schoolwork with mom just like gently looking over them. And then pans off next scene. What it really looks like, one kid's on the ground, like throwing a fit, where another sibling is like looking at the kid on the ground, like, what is he doing? And the daughter's sitting there like, oh my gosh, my brother's again. And like, doing the work. Like, that's real life. And the individuals that show that, I feel like it is the best thing individuals can do for the mental health of society as a whole. Because we get so wrapped up in this comparison game. And we've all been there in moments where we compare ourselves and we still fall into that pit of comparison. Now, I was thinking about it last night because we talked about it yesterday on our call, and it's one of my favorite topics as well. And Michael will appreciate this because there's a paradox in it as well, right? Like, yes, comparison is the thief of joy, but it can also be utilized as a tool. To compare is not necessarily bad, it's how we frame it, right? Like, are we seeking to actually be that person, or do we want similar fruits as that person? If we want similar fruits as that person, how can we come at it from a curious mindset to figure out what that person is doing that then we can apply to our lives or our businesses or just our situation, the season that we're in, to yield the same fruits? We were talking to our brother Donovan about that yesterday, about how comparison is can steal your joy, but because you two are in the same arena, so to speak, um, figuring out what works for you, what's your market, what's your niche, and then yield the fruits, utilizing the same tactics and tools as individuals that are successful. So comparison isn't necessarily a bad thing when framed appropriately.
I can agree with that. And that's what we were covering when we were talking with Donovan yesterday. It started with he'd said he was interested in getting to where I am. And what does that mean? Because I'm me. Obviously, you're Donovan. You can't transform into Daniel. So, you got to kind of clarify what that means and do it yourself. You can find the same audience as someone else, but only you can reach them in your way. Now, Brian McCoppin also says the only comparison that matters, yesterday me. Am I better today than yesterday? I agree with that. That's my modus operandi for every day. I go to bed and I think, was I the best version of myself today? Yes or no? And why not if no? And then wake up the next morning and my goal is to be the best version of me I can be today. What do you think, Michael? Uncharacteristically quiet for
yeah, I'm
such
just
a deep topic.
Do you have your coffee, buddy?
Yeah,
You got your coffee?
Got my bob on too. Now, so what came to me, it's actually just been on my mind, and I'll tie it into this, is 1 Corinthians 2:10.
Perfect.
Actually, no. It's close to that. Hold on. Give me a sec. If you guys could search that, or one of you, where it's take every thought into captive, like make it to filter it through Christ. This is my version of it. So every thought that comes in, like I gotta find it, otherwise it's just gonna drive me nuts.
I like your version of it.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
much better.
Let's go.
Bacchione 2:10. Don't read that book. But the angle that I'm taking on this is that the comparison, similar to when we're sinning, it's not us, but the sin that lives in us. In the same way, how many thoughts do we have? And it's like, maybe a thought will come up like, oh, I wish I was like this person, and then it's like, no, you don't want to. But those thoughts that come up, these are patterns that maybe came from your parents or your friends or culture, and it's not even us comparing ourselves. It's the enemy, right? So, and I think the reframe is really important, where we're not BSing ourselves. It's like, no, it's not right. Like, it's like, and also I think you made the good
fair.
point, Jonathan, where it's like, um, comparison in a certain way very subtle way. I don't even know if we would say, I mean, maybe it is comparing in a certain sense, but, um, you know, taking parts of somebody and a genuine appreciation. I think this slice that is important to break off of it is that it's not jealousy. It's actually an admiration, right? Because I think also we're called to admire the positives in others, and we're called to not brag, boast ourselves, let others praise you, and then we encourage other people. Don't praise yourselves. So I think you know
But do
coming at
you
it, I think
admire someone by comparing themselves to you and finding them superior?
is admiration superiority.
Well, that's why what I'm asking in the context of comparison. If do you admire someone because you see them as superior to you?
No. I mean, well, the enemy does, sure, when it comes up within my life
Yeah,
for sure.
and
But
that's part of the
it's
discernment. I think
admiration of the trait,
kind
to
of rushing up
Jonathan's point.
against. Yeah, yeah, I could see admiration of a specific trait, but I think what we were sort of brushing up against, but not quite fully taking a hold of, was the um, giving of superiority, because that's in essence the enemy's version of it. That's where jealousy comes from.
Yeah.
Someone else is superior to me, and I want to um, replace them.
Yeah, and I think part of the
It's-
reframe, is what this is the whole thing is what is true. So that's why I started with that line.
Mhm.
I still gotta find the line, but it's you're essentially guarding all of your thoughts. A thought comes up. Is this true? Oh, this person's better than me. Is that true? I mean, because essentially you're playing God in that sense. How are they better than you? Do you know every single thing about them? Even those two pieces of evidence, right, is enough to say it's not true. Like you don't know enough. You couldn't know enough. Okay, one aspect is maybe better, right? Maybe they don't have the same addiction you did, but that's not enough to you have no idea. You have no idea the relationships, you have no idea the path, you have no idea everything about it, right? Maybe they are doing great, but who knows how much they struggled, and like you have no idea, you know.
What they say to truly understand a man walk a mile in his shoes.
Correct.
It's not a
And I,
But
snap
even
decision.
yeah, but even then, like we don't know the posture of their heart. We talk about that a lot and we talk about it a lot because it's so freaking important. Like the only person that knows the posture of their heart is the individual and then God. And I used to suffer from pedestalizing people and creating, I guess you can say, somewhat false idols, right? Like if we want to look at it from a biblical perspective,
Yeah,
I had lots of false idols, and
same.
every once in a while, like I still find myself in that trap. But I know it's the enemy wanting me to create those false idols to take my eyes, ears, and heart away from God. So anytime I start putting an individual in the superior place in my life, awareness, we talk about that a lot too, like becoming aware of that and saying no, like like you were talking about, Mike, that person is not necessarily better, but maybe there is a trait in there that God wants me to bring into my life to be able to become the individual that he created me to be. But yeah, pedestalizing people, there's one pedestal and that's for God. And that's a mantra that I continuously repeat to myself. And it's to remind myself often that do not put anybody on a pedestal, not your dad, not your grandpa, not Goggins, nobody, okay? Like God is on the pedestal.
It's true. I mean, everyone down here on Earth is roughly in the same position. It might be, if you imagine life's journey as a linear map that's just sitting on a table, everybody's there on the map that exists in the world. They might be in half an inch to an inch ahead of your position on the map, but they're not off the board like God is. So advice that people give, this is one of the things I was thinking about, because Donovan and I had the conversation prior to Saturday a little bit on X, because he made a comment about wanting to learn how to do something that I talked about doing. And I was thinking about it. Even what I do for a living is not for comparison. It's just advisement. I can say to you, once I've read through your book, these particular areas I think could benefit from changing this in order to make it more engaging for the reader or easier to understand for general audiences. But at the end of the day, if you're not interested in making that particular thing easier to understand for the general audience, if you want it to be subtle and you want it to be surprising for, say, the intellectual, then you don't change it. But if you were coming at it from a position of where I am superior to you in some way, then you would fundamentally alter your story just because I said so. And that's wrong, flat out. Then you apply that to your life, and it's the same thing. You have people all day, every day trying to tell you what to do. And if you choose to listen to them, like Michael said, filter it through the why.
I found the quote.
Go ahead, Michael.
It's casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. So casting down imaginations, right? I mean, this is imagination in a negative sense.
Yep.
And every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God.
Right.
The knowledge of God in this case would be, I mean, one of the things that came to me is no man is good except God alone. Right? Because when you start comparing yourself to other people, again, you're playing God, but you're also, there's kind of, I mean, at least one of the things that I love about our group is that there's no king here. Christ is the king. And we're kind of all coming together to try to and we lead with humility, right? Everyone in this group struggles with something. We've struggled with something, and we do put our weaknesses forward, but we also don't live there either, right? And the paradox of that I always say is no man is good, but we're more than conquerors in Christ. To reconcile those, it's not going to happen overnight. It takes time to study this, but
true. And that's an excellent point. Each of us has led a conversation over the course of the time that we've all sat down to talk, but none of us has tried to lead the group in any way. We've advised. Jonathan has given me wisdom and knowledge about better exercise so that I can be more healthy, but he's never been like, this is what you have to do. Just said, I think you could benefit from this. I'm going to show you this thing, give it a try. If it works for you, we'll keep doing it. If it doesn't work for you, we'll figure out another way. You've done the same thing in conversations with us. You and I have gone down these crazy rabbit holes of mental exercise that lasted longer than everybody else. Everybody else has quit, and you and I have gone on for like an hour, Michael.
Sometimes I'm just holding on for the ride. Wow.
Yeah. But none of us has tried to exert authority, because we all agreed that the authority is God. And we're just here to talk it out amongst ourselves.
I
We
kind
took
of look at too the
we took the
semantical.
comparison out of it without realizing it.
Yeah,
Most of the time, right? Like we do our best. We're human, and sometimes the way the words come out of our mouth does come across as like advisement, but it's always from a place of humility. Like if you look at the posture of our hearts, like it is
Right.
always from a place of humility, even if the way we say certain things doesn't always come across that way.
Well, even when that happens, usually one of us is like, "What do you mean?" And then we have to go through it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so it would have made more sense if I said it this way.
Yeah.
You know? Absolutely. So I want to go back to Corinthians a little bit because it's an interesting passage. Can you read it off again, Michael?
yeah. Casting down. Maybe I should go line before. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations, and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. And then I'll just read the next one. And having in a readiness to revenge all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled.
That's an interesting part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we might have to break that down. And having
Yeah.
in a readiness to revenge. Well, New King James Version is, and being ready to punish all disobedience with your obedience is fulfilled. When your obedience is fulfilled.
I believe its obedience to God is fulfilled.
Yeah.
Now that's a mental exercise.
Yeah. But what made me think of this is somebody shared the quote. I'm sure many have heard it, which is from Gandhi. Watch your thoughts, for they become your words become your actions become your habits become your character becomes your destiny. So, and it starts with the thoughts. They say, well, we
Yeah.
have 10,000, 50,000 thoughts. So taking each thought into captivity. I mean, you're 50,000. You're guarding your house, which is your mind, and here comes a thought. Wow, that person's doing so good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're playing God. And when you
And
start
what does
doing
that captivity mean? You put it in a box. So you're taking it out of the context of the situation and separating it somewhere else.
But a clear box for me personally, so I can.
Well, there's
assess it.
there's the self-reflection part that comes after. Just specifically,
in the moment.
That caught my attention because it's something I kind of do on a regular basis before you can see it on any of these videos. If you want to go back to it, there's always a moment where my eyes go that way because my brain's like, I've got a thought, trap it and move it over here and then work it out a little bit before it comes out of my mouth. I'm not an off the cuff person, really. We were talking about that backstage about injury and feeling off balance, mental stress, that sort of thing, the urge to isolate when the world becomes difficult and hard to comprehend. It seems to be mostly a guy trait from what I could tell, but I think that's kind of the same thing. You step aside until it makes sense again. So in that verse, putting the thought into captivity is very similar. You're putting it aside taking it away from the situation, and then you're able to look at it outside of the context of what's happening right then and there. And that brings wisdom. In theory, anyways, as long as that your thoughts are aligned with God's intent, it brings wisdom.
I think of it too. It's kind of like I don't know why my mind went this way, but it's like I thought of it like it's almost like imagine you have your house and there's like 10,000 people in your house and you've let them in,
Yeah.
and now you don't know who these people are. And now you're going through each one. Like, I think it's in the same way. These are the relationships you should have in your life. Why do you have each relationship? It doesn't mean it's just like, oh, because I think a lot of people will fall in this trap. Oh, I found Christ. All these people, do you follow Christ? No. And it's like, it's not that simple, right? It's it's more of like, I think Jonathan nailed it with the word curiosity. You're looking at each one. I think that's where you were going as far as the empty or the clear box. At least what I heard with that is that you take thought. All right, let's look at this. Because, for example, like let's say anger is an issue for somebody. You don't just say like it's not as straightforward as okay, anger is not obedience to Christ. Maybe in some aspect it is, but like or lust. It's like no, lust bad, right? Like it's more of like, okay, well, why are you there? What are you connected to? Where's the
Mm-hmm.
wound here? Okay, because otherwise, at least for me, a trap I fell into was, I can't do X, like I can't do all these things rather than why do I do those things? What is that? What am I getting out of that? So there's a certain sense of allowance. It doesn't mean you know, allow it to continue, but it's more of like, all right, let's take a look at this. Like if you're trying to rebuke someone and you're just going around shaking your finger, that's not maybe the solution. Maybe it's like, well, what are you getting out of this, right? I think it was Gabor Mate who had something that really stood out to me, where it just like not why the addiction, like why the pain or something. Like and he would always go like, what are you getting at this? And it wasn't like, what are you getting out of this? It was like, what are you getting out of the drugs? What is it fixing? Right? Because a lot of it is like, don't do drugs. It's like, all right, we know that. Like, what are you getting out of this? Right. And
Yeah, the why.
yeah.
I don't know, that commercial when we were kids with the egg in the frying pan, that really stopped me, like 100%. I would say with the government,
I think we lost Jonathan.
He froze in a great spot.
He did. It's quite the expression. Hopefully he comes back soon.
Looks like Johnny Bravo.
Somebody's gonna have to clip that. There we go.
Oh yeah.
all right, was it my Wi-Fi that went out?
I think so.
Yeah. Dude,
Yep,
you
there it
froze in
is.
a
Okay.
great spot.
You
Bro,
froze on a
I need-
great expression though.
I'll clip
Did
that.
I need to get a new router. I think it's time. My poor dinosaur router. I was saying that Gabor Mate, the nice thing about what you said, Mike, is it serves two purposes. Not only is it coming at it from a place of curiosity, but it also serves as a pattern interrupt. So when you feel yourself taking a left turn down that path of lust or disobedience to God, asking those questions comes at it from a place of a child, but it also serves as a hard, cold stop in your brain and allows you to disconnect a little bit versus continuing down that path. It's like a speed bump, so to speak. And anytime we go down that path with whatever thoughts, that is one of the greatest tools that we have in our pocket if we're able to access it in that moment. And that's the tricky part, is being able to take a beat long enough to interrupt that pattern, which is easier said than done, right? Simple, not easy. And telling yourself, like, I wrote down this thing I'm just going to take a left turn because I wrote down this thing a couple years ago, and I think you guys can tell me if it is applicable or not, but the way we identify ourselves when incongruent to our ideal self is difficult to overcome. It takes daily awareness to ensure we are speaking to ourselves in our ideal form, not our lesser self. Our brain has been wired for our whole lives to believe we are the lesser version of our ideal self. And resistance will be met when breaking through and elevating to our ideal self, version 2.0. We must recondition our minds. And that reconditioning of the mind comes with the comparison trap as well. Like, this all comes down to reconditioning
Yeah.
of our
The road
mind.
to heaven
We work
feels
at our
like hell.
muscles, we need to work at our brain too.
It's you know, the road to heaven feels like hell is breaking those patterns. You're dying to what isn't. It's so you're dying to what isn't real and true, but it's those comforts, you know. Um, taking for example in this sense, it's I think it's a big part of it is the emotions and thoughts, which are lies. So taking, for example, somebody compliments you, it makes you feel good. Well, then what happens now? You're in the trap that if someone says something bad about you, now you feel bad. Now you're a slave to how people see you. But there's a kind of nuance, right? Because I think the nuance part is like where the paradox comes in. Because then I'll often hear people say, which I've said at points in my life, I don't care what anybody thinks. What a lie. Because I do care what people think, but I don't at the same time. Because I do care, for example, what you guys, if I say something, I value your input. But if I pedestalize your input, to use your word earlier, then that's where the trap is. And then I'm a
Yes.
slave to everything everyone says in here. So,
Yep.
I think of Gladiator a lot, win the crowd, but I don't see him as a win the crowd guy, right? He's constantly following his intuition. The crowd is saying, kill. And then he's watching what the emperor says, and he says, okay, kill, because now he's really following the crowd. He's the
Correct.
one who's, consumed by and now he doesn't kill him. And he accepts what's going to happen. He doesn't know what's going to happen, but Maximus the Merciful. And then now the crowd's cheering, and they were, and look how quickly they flip flop. So, yeah.
It's a perfect example in a cinematic reference anyways, because it's not how the world tends to shake out. A lot of the time you do what you think is right and the crowd boos you. They don't accept it. And particularly when it challenges all of their paradigms at once, that's when it can get dangerous. Movies are great, but they're, as a novelist, they're fiction.
I think the 2020, you want to like, I always go back to that because people help, like, everybody had their belief, and think about how many families had different beliefs. Even now, it's like the split. And I think it's in part because it's difficult to tap into that paradoxical nature. It's paradox to the ego, but the spirit, it's just truth. That's why you can be like, you know, petting a dog and being kind to one instance and flipping tables another when called.
Yeah.
So
Well, to use a personal example to hopefully explain what I'm thinking here, is it's your favorite story, the school board incident that I had to deal with. That started as a one-on-one. It was between me and the principal of the school that I worked in. The principal was listening to the board and instituted the mandatory testing BS, and I said no. So it started as a one-on-one confrontation. I'm not going to do this for you that you want me to do. And they didn't ask why. They just moved on to punitive measures. And I refused those too. And then it escalated from a one-on-one confrontation over what I considered values to 1-on-7. And it was me against 7 people who had authority within the circle, the arena, if we want to use the gladiator reference, that I was existing in. So I was up against 7 kings, all looking at me like I'm the a-hole because I didn't want to be involved in the vax mandate crap and the mandatory testing and none of that stuff. But the crowd didn't agree with me. Most people in my area thought I was wrong. I didn't know that until after the fact when I started talking with folks about it. There was a lot of arguing about it. But the only people at the time when it happened that agreed with me was my immediate family. My mom, my stepdad, and my daughter. Everyone else that I spoke to that was in that particular social circle was on board with their decision. Well, if you're not going to do it, you're not making everybody else safe, so they did the right thing. I could have taken all of that and gone, okay, maybe I was wrong. But every instinct inside of me said no. And I believe that was God. Said, hey, you're not wrong. This just sucks. That's it. And it's always going to suck. Because life is like that. Oh, hey, we got a good morning. Yes, family is the most important part of our lives. That is true. But if I had compared myself to the majority of the people that responded to my story, then maybe I would have made a different decision. I don't know if I would have because I can't go back in time and test it out, but it's entirely possible that if I was in the mindset of giving people authority, like Jonathan said, pedestalizing them, I could have looked at that school board as if they were better than me. And it might have changed my mind.
Well, I think this is important too, because it was Jordan Peterson who made this reframe in my mind, with where does it's authority, and there's authority and there's more to it, right? And we could do a whole conversation on authority, but
True.
there's authority, competence, and power. And to use that specific breakdown is that behind everyone's request to do something, whatever it may be, because we all have to follow laws and we have to essentially follow authority in our life in different ways. Do we believe in the heart of that authority? And when we use authority in a certain sense, please, I want you to push back.
Yeah, I will. Well, I'm going to let you finish first.
Yeah. Because I was thinking about this big in 2020 is that there's I think authority that comes from a truth and authority that comes from people. And it's like the cop who he is the badge, like his whole identity is from that, or a cop who just wants to do what's right, and he is for the people. And there's many corrupt cops, and there's also good cops out there who genuinely try to follow what's right. And to do that is also to disobey that's why I said before, I think a really good soldier is good at obeying orders and he's good at disobeying orders. So, but what was your What was the point of contention?
I have kind of a radical idea on this sort of thing. I don't believe in authority. Never have. It's been a fundamental part of my existence. And maybe it's a response to certain, we'll say traumas in my youth, but it served me pretty well through most of my life. I believe in leadership, not authority. I don't think fundamentally any human being has any capacity to be an authority over another human being. I believe that human beings have the capacity to lead other human beings in some way. And the difference to me is that someone who has experienced something can lead another person through a similar experience using knowledge that they've gained. Example, what do you see in firefighter training? Former firefighters who have been in those situations, walking other people through what they know to be the most effective way to save lives and preserve themselves, versus somebody who has never experienced that trying to show somebody else how to do it. They're just making it up, essentially. Even if they've read a bunch of books, it's imaginary, like that Corinthians verse. It's an imaginary thought. It's not something that they have actually dealt with. So, no, we can't know in the moment whether or not a person has experienced the thing that they're trying to show us. But we can ask before we accept their advice, their suggestion, what have you, as a potentially useful piece of information. But authority has a sort of connotation. It's not exactly right by definition, but it has a social connotation of superiority.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas leadership has a social connotation of guidance. I don't try to lead things that I don't know. But there are a lot of people in the world who try to be an authority on things that they don't actually know.
Yeah, I think this is where me and you, Sean, because I think at least the way I look at our conversations like this is I look at it's semantical in the same way I remember doing a podcast with Jonathan where we were talking about submission, specifically a woman in a relationship with a man. That's a whole other conversation, especially godly. Just to touch on that, man is to be obedient to Christ, and woman is to be obedient to her husband and children, and that's the chain.
That's the biblical statement,
but
yes.
But if you use the word obedience, right, that can just stir up, and that's why I look at maybe a good place to go is what does that literally mean? At least when I look at authority, I look at the root word author. So when someone is, I look at it in the same way of leadership. The first thing I thought of is like someone can step up and be like, I'm a leader of this community and they're full of shit. So it's like, I think this is kind of where words, it matters more the spirit behind the person.
That's
like,
why
because,
socially, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I look at it like an author. Do you choose, in a sense, what came to me was like, do you choose to believe in this person's story?
Right.
Because like that's when Jordan Peterson was talking about power, like what stood out to me is like, what do you want? You want men to be weak? So this is where it's like this idea of we're more than conquerors in Christ. Really, it's like more than conquerors in Christ. And we're called to essentially be warriors in that sense. We're called to be strong. And I think there's a certain sense of authority built into that, but it's I without question, I agree with you in the sense that the authority aspect is, it can quickly become, I guess I'm more interested in authority, the word authority.
All right. Well, hey, let's look at what you just said. Author. Who do you trust to write your story?
God.
Myself.
Bingo. Bingo. Yeah. God gives us free will to write our own story.
One sec. The dictionary definition of authority is the power or right to give orders, make decisions, and enforce obedience.
Which the ultimate authority is God. I know we all agree on that.
Correct.
But so many times we willfully give the pen to other people to write our life story.
Correct.
And there are moments, unfortunately, yeah, I agree. Because being led, I think, is super important.
Yeah. That's where,
Because there
think
are
about the
moments.
military.
Exactly. There are moments, think about life in general. There are moments
Yeah.
where we need shepherds in order to lead us into territories that we've never been. And then once we are led there, we can look back at all the other sheep and then lead them to that same land or that same thing, right? So there are moments where we need to be led, and there's moments where we need to lead.
That's
and having
the
that
gift
discernment.
of experience. Yeah, that I was talking about.
So taking it to the author part that you were talking about, Mike, like I think about that often. I'm like, who is in charge of writing our story? We are. God gave us free will. He gave us the pen and said, here, I'll be there for you. I will carry you during certain aspects of life and the seasons that you're in, but you ultimately have the free will to write your own story. Now, when we look to others, and Lord Fauci keeps popping in my brain, Mike, thanks for that. So many people look to him and pedestalize him and said, okay, whatever he says, we are going to do. And that was wrong. We don't look to one man for all the answers.
And good current event example of this, I don't know if you guys have heard about this particular event, but the leader of the AMA was interviewed and questioned about, I know it's a hot button topic, I'm just going to skim it, but the transgender medical stuff. And one of the things he said in the interview, when pressed on whether or not he had actually looked at the scientific data behind these things, one of the things he said was, no, I deferred to the experts within my staff. He's the leader of the AMA. He's supposed to be the authority according to society. And this is where it breaks down for me. It's an example of what I'm talking about. If he is the authority, but he's listening to everybody else and not verifying what they're telling him, and then giving that information to everyone else from a position of authority, he's wrong. Dead wrong. Because he does not know. But he's passing it off as knowledge. That's not a leader. But he's placed in a position of authority and giving orders based on false information.
But won't people then push back and say, well, he should trust the individuals that he puts underneath them?
Yeah.
And to that, I say, trust but Trust but verify.
Correct. Always. A good leader trusts but verifies.
Trust but verify. And we
You-
can
you
use that
see-
in our own life.
Yeah, you see that in the simplest forms of things. You know, your boss can say, you need to go take the trash out to the dumpster. Your coworker can say, the dumpster's full. And your boss can say, well, okay, then we don't put it out there because it's full. We got to wait until trash day. Or he can look out the window and see if the dumpster's full or not first.
Such a good example. It's so simple.
Yeah, it's not hard.
And I will say, like, Fauci did say some stuff during the whole thing that was true. Like, he wasn't off in left field for everything that he said. But that's the problem. It's like, in those moments of the truth that he spoke, that's when individuals give over that authority to him and say, okay, well, if he spoke true on this particular thing, he must be speaking true on everything. And we do that with not just him, but, you know, other individuals that are perceived authority figures.
Yep. That's my problem with authority versus leadership, is that authority is a blanket trust without verification. The most of the world on social media suffers from that, which is why we had all of the people yelling at everybody who questioned Fauci in the first place, because they gave blanket trust to a title instead of verifying the truth of what that person said.
It's so easy to deflect blame at that point. Like that. And
Yeah,
that's
I'm sure that's a little bit of it. Like, well, I don't have to think about it because somebody else is.
exactly. Yeah. Because I mean, that is the simplest, or not the simplest, but that's the easiest path to say, oh, someone else wrote this into my story, so it's not my fault. Someone else told me to do this. Not my fault.
The devil made me do it.
The devil. Yeah.
The what was it? Authority was given to Christ, right? I forgot the exact quote, but authority was given to Christ, and I would say he's a leader, and the difference. I think the authority is the key. I think one of the key distinctions is, and we saw this a lot with all the bullshit, was where and that's the key word that when you looked up the definition, enforcement, like even see like law enforcement, right? So is it necessarily bad? No, because I also think there are people who, and this is why it gets so tricky, because there's so many layers behind this. That's why I like breaking down these words, and then it allows us to reframe it when these
Yep.
words are brought up, right? So but the key thing, that one of the many things that kind of, one of the thing that we've talked about is asking questions, right? Because, you know, that's authority, like those who are corrupt don't like that, right? Because
Correct.
you really have a couple of, you know, swords that you can pull out and be like, you know, do you know everything that's in the vaccine? Just one that just comes to mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, but is the is the force element was the thing that I think that, you know, you don't have to force something that's right. And that's where I kind of see, he used without saying cast the first stone as an example that comes to mind, where it's like there's a kind of, there's like an inner trust where it's like, you know, if you don't have to sell something, if it works, like it'll sell itself. You know, like I used to do personal training. If I go around telling everybody, yeah, sure, I mean, I might be able to help some, but the best thing I can do is be in the best shape myself. You know, that is what would sell it the most. And my energy and all that. You know, if I want people to be healthy and I'm not healthy, I can't tell you how many overweight gym people I've had. I remember seeing so many memes. I must have been like all across America, you know. So see you, John.
Bye. Love you guys.
Love you, brother. Yeah. Leadership, the plain definition of leadership is the action of leading a group of people or an organization. The leadership is actually a verb, to lead. Authority is not an action. But that's just me kibitzing with words because I'm a wordsmith and it's what I do.
No, I'm with you too, because I mean, I remember hearing like spelling, right? It's a spell, right? Because these words, words trigger people. And I think it can actually be a good thing because I'm on the same page. Because people, you know, I've had so many conversations about politically and like, why don't we have a good, like they've been there, at least in my experience. When I think of people like Ron Paul or, you know, and even any time you throw out a name, somebody's gonna have a disagreement. But I think of like Ron Paul or JFK. I was listening to the speech JFK gave before he was killed. And it's just like that there is lost my train of thought. What were you saying just before this?
Leadership was an action, authority is not.
I don't know. It'll come back to me.
Yeah, I'm sure. There's comparison involved in that too, because that's the root of it. We give authority to people who we compare with ourselves individually, but as a group. That's the weird part of it. Each individual looked at the appearance of the little man, Mr. Fauci, and then looked at the title that he held and compared it with their own knowledge of the situation that he was talking about, and then lazily, in my opinion, went, well, his title means that he knows, so I'm just going to believe him. But nothing in any of his statements, speeches, etc., felt like leadership to me.
You know what's crazy? This just came to me.
Go
How long
for it.
does it take to get a master's degree or doctorate? Let's go doctorate all the way.
Doctorate, I believe, is at least 8 years.
How old's the enemy?
How old is the enemy?
Yeah.
Immortal. So
Well, I would say
can you quantify
thousands,
that?
thousands of years, right? Like it's been around. So like to me, it's crazy to say this, but like, because 10 years ago, Mike wouldn't say this, but to me, the people I would trust the most are people who are, it's almost like they're eternal students. They're people, because that I think ties in with the title thing. You know, you go 8 years and then you got your title. Now you're a master. Like, all right, sure. Like, you know, you take like Star Wars to go off a little bit, right? There's training and then you finally have it, right? But with the Force, for example, it's like you have like you can still like kind of lose it. There's like a kind of trust. You're in the flow kind of thing. Like you don't, you know.
I think you're kind of talking about experience.
I guess what I'm saying, the main point that I'm saying is that it takes 8 years to become that, but to me, it's, you know, it's people. To me, I hate to say this because
Spit it out.
so it sounds. And please break it down because I'm not saying because it can be totally misconstrued. But to me, like I trust an expert who's a Christian, and not the title Christian, because it's not that, and it can be broken down. What I just said.
You trust an expert whose heart is led by God.
Yeah, which to me is
Okay.
like, do you know how hard that is? Like a genuine Christian Like not, and when I say genuine Christian, they're not entering the arena saying I'm a Christian. They're entering the arena with such like, because what does it mean to be a Christian, right? What does that mean? Humility, kindness, you know, testing spirits. So they're even testing themselves. They're saying, this is the information that we have. Like, so, maybe I say religious, someone who is a seeker. They're seeking truth, right? Trust the science. What is science, right? Because I'm not against science. Science is awesome. Like, I think it's cool. Like I remember being in science class when I was a kid. I lit up. So
Science is an extension of faith. That's the part
correct.
that people have forgotten, is that science is the further understanding of the world that God gave us. If you
Okay,
look it up, in historically, even during the Age of Enlightenment, scientists believed that understanding the world that God gave us was the fundamental root of it. Not understanding the world, it was understanding the world that God gave us. He said, when you have a serious medical condition, you quickly realize doctors don't know everything. It's because nobody can know everything. Titles are nice, but you can't provide blind obedience to anyone with the title. Correct. That's the point that I've been talking about. And I think with what you were trying to suss out there, so let's try this as an example. If you live in a village, the village has an elder who is in charge of the day-to-day operations of the village. The village also has a leader of the hunters who go out into the dark and bring food and water back for everyone to be safe. Now, if the village runs out of water, who knows where the water is? The elder or the leader of the hunters?
Leader of the hunters.
Right, because he has experienced it. So if the elder says we're out of water, we should go north to get water, and the leader of the hunter says the water's to the east, why would you listen to the elder? He doesn't know. He's in a position of authority over the village, but he does not know. The Bible has been our tome of knowledge for much longer than anything else that we know as humans. So when you said you would trust a person who, had a heart led by God and knowledge of the situation, it's perfectly acceptable, because you've got 2 points of actual leadership: the guidance of the word and the experience of what is happening. That's what I was talking about before with the firemen. You are more inclined to follow directions of someone who has shown you that they know how to deal with the experience or a similar experience than you would some random person. Like with the Jedi thing, the experience of being a Jedi, if you're out in, going across the galaxy, visiting other planets, helping people and doing stuff, and I know it's completely fantastical, follow me here, you have experience within the different worlds all around. So if you had to go deal with a group of people from a specific planet, you would ask advice from the person who's been there, not the guy who went and lived on a mountain for 30 years. Yeah, he's really in tune with the Force itself, but he doesn't know these people.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to the inner. That's why it's God first, is because you have to not trust yourself, but trust God within, to trust God within others. Like, you know, you have to work with internally, because then because the more you're aligned with truth, the more you'll see the truth in others. Just kind of a thing,
Mhm.
I think. The light within you will lead you to the light within other people, and the more aligned with that, you'll be able to know.
Yeah,
Because even
exactly.
the light within, and that's why it's so, even like you said with our group earlier, right? There's going to be times where I'm stumbling towards darkness, and it's the group's responsibility. Well, however you want to frame it, like it's the the group to not shine a light where I'm dark here, and vice versa. Um, because it's not, to your point, because I agree, right? Like, I know we kind of went into it, but like I'm completely agree. Like, I don't just blindly trust people. I mean, that's why I've been so outspoken. That's why I love your story. I think it's something that I really appreciate about you, because that took courage, right? It's very easy now. Um, it's past to say certain things, but in those moments, hey, I'm going to lose my job. I'm a, where to like to me, those who are just like, I'll lose everything. I mean, that to me as a Christian, it's built into the fabric. I'll lose everything, but not the truth. Like,
Mhm.
and it's a nice
Not what I
poetic
was
thing.
thinking at the time. I mean, I'll admit that some of my reaction to it was wrapped in stubborn rebellion. There was
Yeah.
a point eventually when it started to escalate where I just said, I'm going to continue to say no because I no longer have any faith in these people's leadership.
Yeah.
So I have to question everything that comes out of their mouth. But from the jump, the start of it was, I don't believe this is true. You need to prove to me that it is before I follow you. Because they're human. Now, if God had come down in a vision or sent, one of the archangels in a vision and said, yo, go get the shot, I would have been there. Because God is not people. We're made in his image. He's not made in our image.
Yeah. And I quickly saw the trap too, that the enemy, whatever, wants you to be anti-vax or vax. Because let me tell you, tomorrow something else might come out, and the vaccine is the right thing to do. I speak for myself.
Yeah,
But
the truth of that is the enemy, it doesn't care about the vax itself. The enemy wants you to follow blindly because then it can take you down dark places.
yeah,
As has been said over and over again in thousands of other podcasts, it can't do anything itself, but it can manipulate you into doing the things that it wants.
yeah.
And there's no better tool than one that does not question. Says, I believe the key is to live your life humbly. I agree. That doesn't mean to not stand up for what you believe in or are striving for in this life. Also agree with that. Lots of people will try to guide you down their path instead. True. That's what we've been talking about this whole time. And we, as humans, get caught in the comparison trap and give authority to people who are not leaders.
I speak about this with my dad a lot. He always says, walk your path. Very grateful for that message. And me and him go back and forth. And, because
The question's
I'm,
how,
yeah,
isn't it? Yeah.
because I came up with the example that it's like, to me, it's like playing a piano, right? Or a musical instrument. It's like your song, Daniel, is going to be different than my song. Thank God we don't have the same song, right? But there's key elements, and this is where I think Christianity comes in, where it's like, well, there's tempo and there's rhythm, and it's, I think, foolish to ignore there's structures behind that in the same way you're a storyteller, right? So there's
Correct.
structures. The what is it? The what Campbell, Joseph Campbell's thing. I think it was Joseph Campbell. The structure behind it. So like that to me is like, that's where I think it can become a trap where you just say, this is that key distinction is, don't follow yourself, follow God. Because when you follow God, your story's going to naturally play out, different than everyone else's. So because
It's going to
the
play out
trap
the
is
way God
following
wanted it.
yourself. What's that?
It's going to play out the way God wanted it to. That's
Yeah.
the crux of faith is, and this is a little bit of a paradox, which I know you love, but if you are only doing what feels right in the moment, not following the path that's laid out for you, you're in what's known as dissonance. And that means that you're playing the notes, but you're playing them off rhythm. So you're outside of the structure.
That's where I think that there's a certain paradox in rebellion, because I've reflected on rebellion a lot. I've seen a lot of people
Big one for me too.
yeah, well, you brought it up. That's what made me think of it, because you could say Christ, was he a rebel? Like on one level, yeah, but like on another level, he was just completely obedient to truth, completely. So it's
That's because there's two paradigms at play. When
social law.
when Christ came to the world, he brought him, God was down inside the thing that he created that was being run by his creations. So he was inside of their structure, but he was moved by God's structure. And the two things are not the same. So, like, to use your piano example, you can use both hands to manipulate keys to make a beautiful song if they're within the same structure.
Yeah.
But if you're playing two different songs on two different hands, it just sounds like noise.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a lot of people fall. I've fallen into that trap. Just want to be different. Just want to be different. You'll naturally be different. It's I think impartially the introvert extrovert lighthouse analogy, or the where you had said it's source code. Just
Well,
getting in line with source code.
Christ came to the world as it was and spoke the truth of God. So he was speaking the truth of the universe to one thing that operated in a different way. So it was rebellion in the world, but not rebellion against the universe.
Yeah, interesting. Like, I love that word. I know people like, oh, it could be like, but I look at it like, what is universe? It's one verse,
Right.
and like multiverse is like, to me, it's social law. It can always change. It's different verses, right? Like,
I mean,
always
it
look
is
at it like
true.
that.
Each individual person perceives the world differently. So each individual person has its own universe among many, which would be a multiverse. And that's what screws up a lot of our ability to make group decisions. Carlin, never underestimate the stupidity of groups of people in large numbers, or whatever he said.
Yeah.
It's everybody thinks and perceives the world in their own way amongst each other. So that's a multiverse. But Christ was speaking from the universe, from the one, and the truth. Oh, what we got here? Big post. Took me 30 plus years of grinding to realize my goal of being a storyteller of a quality I wanted. Yeah, takes a long time to get good at something. Yesterday, I ordered 300 hard copies of my book, Inker, a combo of faith and the right people helping. That's awesome, dude. So happy to hear that. It's a great book, too, by the way. And not just because I helped him with it. It literally was when he showed me the original storyboard, I was like, this is awesome. And now we're going to make it fantastic. But yeah, that was it. Oh, thank you. Exactly. Because it was meant to be. That's how I look at every client that reaches out to me, because at that time, God said, this thing needs your help. And I said, I'm here.
Shout out to X. That's how we all kind of came together, I'm pretty sure, right? I mean,
yeah.
How I found Zach and Jerry and all these guys, and then
Justin reached out to me through X, yeah, and brought me into his circle, which was sort of connected to Zach and all them. And, that's how we became brothers in our search here, and got to this point where we're sitting on the internet on Sunday having wild conversations. That's the song. If you're dancing to the song that God's playing, you're having a good time. You're trying to do a totally different dance that doesn't fit the rhythm of God's song, then you just end up being a fool. I don't know. That's a bad analogy.
Oh, so the rebel is just, it's, I think it's another way of trying to, it's just always saying no. It's like, no, not like, it's
no, it's not always saying no. I mean, it can.
That's to me, I'm saying the trap of that's because I think some take it to the extreme, but I think this is where the paradox of it comes in, because, I think it's important element to have key part of it. Key part of it is element of it.
Yeah. I think every seeker of truth and wisdom is a rebel, because they are not accepting what's being given to them without question. Even Gandhi was considered a rebel.
I guess it's when the identity comes in, partially, when you identify as a rebel, because that's where there's a kind of trap, because then it's like you're always saying no to what the crowd is doing. But sometimes the crowd gets it right. Sometimes social law gets it right.
A broken clock can be right twice a day.
It's true. Because that was something for me. It's like, oh, if the majority, like, no, the majority is doing something right, it needs to be like, well, they're doing this right. But oftentimes it's not.
You wouldn't know that unless you actually question it and find the truth in it. That's the thing. And like the bigger rebellion trap is, like you said, the constant no, because if you're saying no to the truth, then you're missing wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Like if what's being told to you is verified and you still refuse it, then you're going the wrong direction. It's a weird one. Something to think about. It's just about noon. Some of you should get thee to church at this point in the day. So we're going to wrap it up here. Michael, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on YouTube. Just type in my name. I don't think Life Talks will come up. So I don't think there's another Michael Bacchione. Yeah. You can find me on there. And yeah, we're just trying to seek truth. I think humility and courage are my two of my favorite words. So you have to Just when you think you know it, just stay humble and you'll find. I think it was pick up the sword who said that earlier. Completely
Mhm.
agree. Because humility will take you down the right path, and courage to speak it, to what we were just speaking about. To courage for Daniel to speak up when 7 riflemen were pointing their guns. So saying this is what you need to do. So yeah, you can find me on there.
And I am Daniel P. Riley of Whimsyland Literary Coaching and Services. I help creatives create things. I edit novels and comic books and anything that anybody puts in front of me, all for the greater good of telling your story your way in the best fashion possible. This has been Coffee and Christ on a Sunday morning, our bi-weekly ramble into the search for wisdom. I hope everybody has a great holiday tomorrow for Labor Day. I am probably just going to sleep the day away because I'm exhausted. Whatever you end up doing with your free time, I hope you do it to the fullest and with God's intent. Have a good one.